this podcast, Ed Boudreau from Optum talks about design thinking and how could leaders build organizations around design thinking. So stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Future of Data podcast. Today we have with us Ed Boudreau from Optum, and a short bio. So Ed is VP of Fusion, an enterprise accelerator for Optum. Optum's mission is to help people live healthier lives and to help make the health system work better for everyone. Boudreau has founded and has been a part of several startups in Boston, as well as Intuit Innovation Lab. He specializes in convergence of human-centered design, business strategy, rapid development to optimize experience and business outcomes. So thank you so much, Ed, for agreeing to join our community and sharing your thoughts with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Beautiful. So why don't we start with your journey? Like, what brought you to this side of design thinking innovators? And if you can just walk us through your evolution as to your current role.
Yeah, I'd love to. So part of Boston startups, the first startup we sold for $500 million, and subsequent startups after that. So first one was Direct Hit. The second one was Exit 41. And that's really where I started to develop patterns around the concept around design thinking. And, in a startup, you need to go super fast. You need to make sure that you have the right ideas as you move along and right experiments that you're creating. And then unless you're doing, design thinking and leveraging frameworks, you might be pivoting more than you want to. So after startups joined Intuit Innovation Labs and learned a tremendous amount there, bringing, new products to market and leveraging tools like the Jobs to be Done, which is an incredible framework. And, then founded a startup in the local area with a co-founder, SnapApp. And that we leveraged tools and techniques of design thinking, product strategy, agile development. And then, really joined Optum with a mission in mind of how do we make the healthcare system much, much better. So combining all of those tools from a startup perspective and now run Fusion, which is an accelerator in the enterprise in which we're doing, leveraging design thinking tools, but also thinking about, market strategies and really what's the market problems we're solving, and then how do we accelerate development. So it's the culmination of all those startups, but also the tools that are built over the years, but have had a massive impact in Optum, and it's a great company.
Interesting. So before we talk about your background and your journey and sort of specifics into design thinking, let's talk about what is Optum. If you can shed some light to our audience, what do Optum? So that will be helpful.
Sure. Optum is a Fortune 6 company. And there's over 200,000 employees, over 200 billion in revenue. But the most important part of that is it's everything in healthcare. So from healthcare services to healthcare products, and really the full spectrum of healthcare. And it couldn't be more meaningful to know coming to work every day that we're going to impact someone's life, whether it be a provider, a doctor, a patient. So Optum itself is the product and services side of United Healthcare Group. So there's United Healthcare under United Healthcare Group, and also Optum.
We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast. Interesting. Thank you so much for shedding light on that. So tell me this. I think so. Fortune 6, right? So ginormous company. That means very thick culture bounds. That means very specific rules, what to do, what not to do. Very regulated industry, being in health. So how do you manage to innovate in such a tight ship, or such a at least moderated and such a cultural thick ship? If you can shed some light, some of your thoughts on that.
Sure. I've always believed, even a small company or a large company, innovators have a specific mindset,
Mm,
and it's really around experimenting. It's about going fast. It's about learning. And I think large or small, if you bring that mindset, you're going to create value in a company. Even though, healthcare is as you mentioned, a very regulated space, there is still pockets of opportunity for innovation. We all know that. But again, if you bring the innovator's mindset, I believe you can
mm.
change anything, large company or small company.
That's, I think, well put. So let's talk about your current role. So what's your role in Optum?
Sure, absolutely. So I've built a concept called Fusion, and as you mentioned, with large companies, you have a lot of challenges. So one of the challenges I've found in larger companies, and not only Optum itself, is that there are silos. So it could be,
Mm,
you have a development silo, a design thinking silo, business over there and development over here, and really found the opportunity to fuse things together. And that's really where the brand came from, is Fusion. And what we do is we leverage design, not only design thinking concepts, but things like Google Sprint methodologies. And what we'll do is we'll hold Fusion sessions and get diverse groups together. So it could be business partners, development partners, architects, whatever we're solving for, and we put that in the forefront. But we hold Fusion sessions in which we're running through different things like personas, who are we solving for, journey maps, the classics of human-centered design. But then what pains is someone going through in their journey, and then how can we actually solve for those? And we create what we call integrated solutions. So by the end of a Fusion session itself, we'll know who we're solving for, what specific moments in time that we're addressing, what potential solutions there are. And then within a week or so, we can have a digital prototype, a paper prototype, a clickable prototype. So for us, it's about identifying those moments of need and going super fast to then experiment and prove that you can have an impact.
interesting, interesting. So design thinking, I think that's fascinating word, and obviously we have started hearing about that word from many of the conversations nowadays. So that means it's finding its way into the corporate culture, and people are sort of thinking about it. So what exactly is that? If you can shed some light to our audience.
Absolutely. So design thinking in my mind is really having empathy for, I call it, whom you serve. So, in the case of healthcare, it could be a patient or a provider, and really thinking about doing ethnographic research. And really where it comes into play is identifying the persona. Doing ethnographic research, you're finding the true need. A great example that here in Optum, one of my first design thinking projects was weight loss, and how do we actually impact someone who is faced with that challenge. So when we did ethnographic research, we learned a tremendous amount. So we went into people's homes and just had open conversations with them, checked out their home environment, really asked them open-ended questions, looked in their fridge, what their lifestyle was like. But we learned a tremendous amount. One of the things that we learned in doing that is people hate their scale. And it actually has nothing to do, in a way, with weight loss. What we discovered is
Interesting.
people want a coach. So that level of design thinking led us to, let's do the right research, let's synthesize, let's understand really where someone's pains are, and then leading to a solution. So what we ended up coming up with is a coaching solution in which they could experiment with different things. They could experiment with food, they could experiment with exercise, but we made that their choice. So I think a classic product approach might be, let's just send someone a scale and measure their their weight. That would have been the worst thing we could have done. So to me, design thinking is really about discovery, understanding the true need, and then coming up with solutions and testing them super fast to make sure that you're on the right track.
We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast. Interesting. That's fascinating, by the way. So let's talk about talk about weight loss, right? So you're given a task to research on the weight loss and the experience, and so how do you start from the design thinking? So what are some of the thoughts that will come to you? If you can walk us through the life cycle of design thinking when developing something like, say, weight loss program.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, so something like that, design thinking classically starts with market research. So, in terms of what different tools and technologies and companies, are out there. So from a market research perspective, but you're also looking at, different dimensions of market research. It could be, the psychology of weight loss, approaches. And what you're really trying to do is just identify different patterns of thinking more than anything to, bring out different ideas. And then, you move from market research to, consumer research or ethnographic research. And there's different methods of research that you can employ, whether it be a survey, whether it be in-home, whether it be, people on the street type of thing, to start to hone in on what are we solving for here. And then you move from kind of that initial synthesis to getting an idea of what you're solving for. And that's a huge step in design thinking, is honing in on what I call a design statement or design principles. So an example of that is, we're creating a platform to enable, consumers to, help with their overall health and well-being. And if you notice there, I didn't say anything about weight loss, because that presumes that that's a path that you're going to go down, when you should have kind of that learner's mindset of, we don't know the solution yet. And I find that to be potentially one of the hardest things for people to do, because I'm sure we're all in that, hey, what's the solution? What's the product? What's the offering? Because that's what we're paid for in a way, is to have answers. And I think within design thinking, that's probably one of the most important parts, is not having the answer in mind and having that learner's mindset. So as you go through different stages of market research, ethnographic research, you start to synthesize, and that's a key part in design thinking, synthesize around what you've learned, and also come up with different concepts that may apply. And again, not solutions, almost at a conceptual level, what would solve this particular area that we're solving for, but then break into what I call different experiments. And experiments range from, hey, let's do idea sorting or card sorting. You may even have people back in to actually do different sorting, so you can actually start to get into the minds of people. And that's a key aspect of design thinking, is always checking with whom you're serving. And then once you go through that kind of ideation level or concept testing, and again, it's at a very conceptual level, then you can start to formulate what of these different experiments can we combine to actually head towards a solution in which we can actually rapidly test as well. And this is the exact pattern we went down with the weight loss solution that that we had. So what we did is we came up with 8 to 10 different concepts based on the learning that we had. And then we had consumers back in. We had them card sorting, idea sorting. We actually put together, I think at the time, 8 different concepts, and we had them test. We tested that with consumers as well. And this was all done. We had a team behind a one-way mirror, and then really understanding what consumers were saying to us, what they thought about things. And that really led us to, honing in on 2 or 3 different concepts that we could test with them, having them back and understanding. So each time we call these experiments, but the experiment was lightweight. It was super cheap, and we were getting tremendous feedback all along the way. And then once we had that feedback, we then could go into developing a minimal viable product in which we could have consumers back to test as well. So it's getting that constant market feedback. And those are really the 4 stages: research, synthesis, experimentation, and then concept testing.
This is pretty cool. I think so. One of the conversation I had with one of the executive, I think couple of months back, and this is about so it's a very entrepreneurial journey, right? So each design thinking project is like a very tiny startup conceptually, and sort of it just goes from there. And we had this conversation with this executive, and he was adamant on the fact that, hey, you know what, you can't have, so startup is like a jungle gym, like pretty random. You're not a certain, and obviously it sort of impact the pace of how, if you're delivering or if you're sort of working on the scale. This puts you back and say, hey, just go as an entrepreneurial discovery journey. So with that, and in most of the big enterprise are on this mindset of, hey, scale and basically doing it more faster and responding it quicker. So what do you think? How does design thinking play a role in that sort of business strategy? So if suppose you are an executive and saying, okay, no, all I want is, like, we have done this legacy product development roadmaps for eons now, and now, like, going in a very very entrepreneurial journey for some of the products. It might be nuances to scale and whatever. What are some of your thoughts to those executives, if you can share your perspective?
We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Definitely. So it's interesting because we held a recent Fusion session, and it was a 2-day session in which we did a lot of design thinking, and we asked the question, how did this impact your timeline? Can you quantify for us how much time this accelerated you? And the answer was, you accelerated us by a year in 2 days. Wow. And the reason for that is that focusing on the right problem for the right people, and then testing that rapidly, and or putting that roadmap together around, now that you've done this design thinking around who you're solving for, why you're solving the particular problems you're actually looking to solve for, what is the impact on the current state journey, and how does that build to a roadmap, in all of that in 2 days. So what we've found with, and this is outside of my company and inside, is that by having a distributed team, it's hard to play that telephone game of, hey, what are the problems we solve? What are the problems we're solving for? How does that fit in the roadmap? So you can imagine time expanding there, each conversation you have around an organization. But if you can get folks in a room to hold a design thinking session, it really accelerates a team. So even if it's interesting, because one of my startups I founded, we were able to accelerate by getting a small team together of 10 people in the startup, doing design thinking session, and then having concepts that we could then test in the marketplace, after that week. So it really accelerates not only startups, it accelerates enterprises as well.
That's pretty cool, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts there. So let's talk about some other executive in some other company who's stuck with this thick culture of, hey, no, we are a product team, there's no time to innovate or something, right? So we have seen like numerous memes about how businesses sort of resist change, and all they want is change to succeed anyways. So what are some of your thoughts to those executives in those ranks trying to push this idea of, hey, have some design thinking attributes in your business strategy. So what are some of the things that they could do that you could suggest?
Yeah, I'd actually say don't limit yourself or ourselves to just the term design thinking, because when I think of design thinking or product strategy or business strategy, that's really where I think Fusion has had an impact, because we pull elements in from design thinking, but we'll leverage frameworks and tools like the 10 types of innovation. So, and we've done this with executives in this company, and I've done it outside in startups. So a great example would be the 10 types of innovation. The theory behind that process, that book, is that if you have two or more one of the 10 innovations, you'll likely have a successful product or strategy. And the concept behind it is fundamentally that they have really three areas that you focus on. One is experience. So that to me is really design thinking and thinking about the experiences you're creating. Another area is platform. And to me, that's product or platform. And then the other is model. So those are really the three key areas of the 10 types of innovation. But if you run any company that's been successful, through the 10 types of innovation, Uber is a great example, that they've actually created a tremendously different experience for all of us through their application. Their platform is their ability to leverage demand and supply side capability for not only folks who want to ride, but folks who can actually have capacity to deliver, a ride. And their model is much different than that of taxi companies, much of which we know. But again, if you run any company through the 10 types of innovation, Uber, Amazon, you can actually start to see that pattern of innovation. So, for those executives in, larger corporations, leveraging something like that, while not classic design thinking, is strategy thinking, leveraging tools and techniques or frameworks. And that's how I think about design thinking. That's how I think about product strategy. And then, if you think about the other side of, when I call fusion, the other side of that is how do you get things to market? And that's really through, agile methodologies. But what I've seen in the past is that agile teams are fired up, and they don't necessarily understand or have the strategy. But if you bring them through things like the 10 types of innovation with developers in the room and also design thinking methodologies, all of a sudden you have a highly focused, motivated, agile team that understands your full strategy and can drive that to market.
Interesting. And I think one thing that I love about, and definitely I want your perspective on is, so you expanded the concept of design thinking, right? So you said, okay, now we should think of it from a broader horizon of bringing product strategy and business strategy into that. So my question to you is, number one, what made you sort of expand into that? Like, what was the business problems that said, hey, maybe we have to think it from a bigger picture? And then how do you end up doing it? Like, what are your secrets, sort of secret to success in executing and being able to expand it into these three broad verticals?
Definitely. So I think one of the primary motivators there was that I saw silos in a company. So whether it be the agile team sitting there going, I'm not quite sure what we're building, what the strategy is, and then the UX UI team, saying, I'm not sure what our strategy is, and then the business partners going, I know what my strategy is. Like, I just want you to build a thing, and the thing needs to do this. So kind of seeing those gaps, not only in past startups that I've been in, but also large enterprises, saying we really need to understand and fuse people together, and have the development folks with the business folks so that they understand that strategy, having the UX UI folks, the design team, with business folks. So it's really seeing those gaps and those silos said to me, wow. And not only that, we can offer business folks the capability around, hey, let's do research around the market and understand that thing that you want built. Where is I call it the market product fit, because I always start with the market first and then understand how a potential solution then fits what you're looking to achieve. So seeing those gaps, it really inspired me to say, hey, let's start with the business, what problem we're solving. Let's bring in design folks, design thinking folks to understand whom we're solving it for, what specific pains are they kind of going through, what's their journey, and then how does that build to an end-to-end solution that then we can drive to development. But by having all of those folks in a room, the strategy becomes super clear, who we're solving for is clear, what we're building is clear, and that's really why it creates acceleration, because when you have an aligned, fully capable team, that's what creates speed.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, what are some of the design what are some of the design thinking concept that you use? If you can just list some of your favorites, or if they are something like that, so that will be helpful.
Absolutely. So, some of them are making sure you build a persona, and creating empathy around that persona. What pains are they experiencing? Whether it be, for us, it could be a provider, a doctor, a nurse practitioner that's going out and doing home visits. Understanding that person, the persona, making sure that you do ethnographic interviews with either, if it's a nurse practitioner, talking to a multitude of those folks. And another kind of pattern that we use is synthesis, and whether that be that information that you understood from the interview, how are you synthesizing that? What are the key takeaways? What's your understanding of the pains, where the opportunities might lie? So once you do the persona, leverage the personas themselves, then you could do something like build a journey map. So what's the journey of a nurse practitioner? The moment they're in their home, ready to leave for that home visit, what is that? What does that look like? And then once they go to a patient's home, what does that interaction look like? So you're building the journey map itself. And that journey is incredibly important because it really enables you to understand, where the pains are that someone's going through. And then doing, ride-alongs potentially with that nurse practitioner. I'm only using a nurse by example because it's part of our business. But if you're from Starbucks, it would be, making sure at Intuit, we called it follow me home. So would actually go and follow customers home. So follow your customer around, understand, what pains they're going through personally. It's super important to actually do that. Another thing that we leverage highly is the jobs to be done, and incredibly powerful framework by Clayton Christensen. It's why are you being hired as a company, or why is your product being hired? And again, a powerful kind of metaphorical way to understand the actual consumer need, and why they're leveraging your product. And then another kind of methodology that we leverage highly is the Google Sprint methodology, which has a ton of tools and techniques. So once you've built the journey map, you understand the pains. How do you then visually articulate what potential solutions could be? So storyboarding is another powerful tool to create a new journey for your customer and what that may look like. And that helps people articulate the new journey and it could be, how do we help a nurse practitioner in the morning before they leave the home to do an assessment in the field? And then what does their, night look like when they come back? So it could be anything from, physical products to digital, or physical solutions to digital solutions to, engagement solutions. So it really inspires, creativity and thinking. And then, I'm a big fan of rapid prototyping as well. And what I mean by rapid is, do something in PowerPoint and test it with people immediately. And that creates that speed and acceleration. And then as you hone into what the potential solutions could be, rapid prototyping, those solutions and getting those in front of people for that feedback. So those are just some of the tools and techniques that I use on a weekly basis. So
nice. Let's talk about now the people part of this equation. So how do you really how do you basically move a product teams into design thinking folks? Like what are some of the practices that are out there today to transform the existing product mind, like legacy product mindset, to design thinking mindset? So what are some of the best practices out there?
Yeah, so I mean, to some degree, and you can see behind me here, Sticky's become a collateral, and everyone loves to ideate. So, once you leverage some of the tools that I spoke of earlier, persona, gaining empathy for whom you serve is powerful. If you think about there's a great video out there around MRI machines and design thinking. And it's a former GE employee whose job was to create an MRI machine. And it was intimidating to children that actually have to give a child a shot to sedate them a little bit so they were comfortable going in the MRI machine. And then through design thinking, they actually created it's a beautiful scene. It's almost as if the child is going into a boat,
Wow.
and creating this environment of they actually had them skipping rocks to get into the boat, and then as the MRI machine spun, they put fish, and they had fish jumping over
Wow.
the child. So it's an incredibly powerful video, but it's the power of design thinking. And then if you're a classic product person, there's nothing more powerful than whom you're solving for. So imagine, this person who built the MRI machine now seeing children and talking to their parents and saying, hey, can we come back tomorrow? So not only does it have an impact on the child, it has a business impact too, because they no longer have to be sedated. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone. And I think that's how we're all motivated as humans. We're solving human problems. And when it comes down to it, that's the fundamental of design thinking, is you're solving human problems, and people get motivated by that. So after every fusion session we have, people will say to us, that was the most amazing thing I've been through, because we reconnect back to humans.
Interesting. So let's talk about so one thing that we have heard with IdeoLab and any of the design thinking concepts, that so they basically transform, they create a lab, or you have a fusion accelerator. So is that the best way to sort of execute design thinking in your corporation, of just have kind of a lab environment and create that jungle gym atmosphere there, and then invite people and sort of, and what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think there's different ways to think about it and approach it. So, if you don't have the capability, in-house today, IDEO, Continuum, Frog are great companies to go leverage. And it may be that you partner with companies like that to actually imbibe and instill design thinking methodologies to get your teams exposed to that. And as you mature, it could be that you're building a lab, and we work. One of the big things we do is collaborate across with companies like Frog and IDEO and Continuum. They're good friends of ours, so we continually collaborate with them. So, and we've built that relationship. But there's companies like Fidelity that have a lab. So as you mature, as you have a more fundamental understanding, then you can create a lab, inside, and then you're spreading, design thinking methodologies, inside your company on a more, frequent basis. And I'd say, if you're a startup, just start to leverage some of those tools and thinking, because it'll increase your likelihood of success.
Interesting. So if I'm a startup, very very early in my inception, and definitely I have a lot more agility to build the culture. It's not imbibed yet, and I'm just trying to figure out where to go. What are like 1 to 3 steps you could suggest for a startup to get in the direction of design thinking? What are some of the things that you could recommend?
Definitely. So, I mean, I think the 10 types of innovation is a great methodology. Also, there's a book out there, a 101 design methodologies. That's a great resource. And then the jobs to be done is another great methodology and resource. So I think the leveraging 101 designs is will give you different tools and techniques. Continuum, IDEO. Actually, IDEO is another great resource that if you want to kind of instill, design thinking. I think they even have a design thinking playbook that you can leverage. So, elements like that get closer to one of the things I've seen in startups is people don't actually go and talk to their potential customers or the market they're looking at. Absolutely do that. And that's one of the methodologies that I see overlooked, is get that feedback as fast as possible.
Interesting. And now flipping the coin for a bigger corporate enterprise with, again, as very thicker culture, and Optum is lucky to have you to sort of, you already come with equipped with that mindset, and sort of, you have pulled your weight through the startups to make that execute those things. But for companies who don't have design thinking executives, or who don't have sort of that mindset in place, what are some of the steps they could take in the direction of design, so to get themselves in the direction of design thinking?
Definitely. So I'd say it's if you're a corporate executive, I think some of the things are as I mentioned, the 10 types of innovation, because that actually starts at the strategy level.
Mm-hmm.
But really inspires you to think not only about the product or platform that you currently may have, but what experiences do you have? And that starts the tip of the iceberg for, that level of design thinking is, really breaking down who are we solving, for in the marketplace, really understanding, their needs. Another, the jobs to be done is a powerful metaphor. Is why do people hire our product? And it's a different kind of shift in mindset. The classic example there is Clayton Christensen, in a fast food industry, looking to identify which breakfast sandwich would be, most popular. He went in and observed consumers actually buying milkshakes, and really wanted to understand that. And he said, why did you purchase this milkshake? And some of the consumers' examples were, I have a 45-minute commute. If I had a breakfast sandwich, it would spill all over me in my SUV. And if I have kids in the back, I can just hand them the milkshake and they're quiet for the whole ride. So it starts to identify exactly why people are hiring your product, and those attributes. And that really gets down to, a level of design thinking of what are we solving for, what pains are here, and then what approach should we actually take. So that's the beginning of, if you're an executive, just start to leverage different models that inspire you to understand more about your consumer and how to resolve some of their real pains.
Interesting. And how do you, now let's talk about collaboration a bit. Like, how do you, because when I hear the word design thinking, so to me it clicks the brain of, hey, it's very entrepreneurial and you have to go out and do your stuff and get your information right. How do you get to sort of collaborate when you're in that? Like, if you can shed some light on how you can get team to work collaboratively on this idea of design thinking.
Yeah, I think the inspiration that I've always seen is you either have a massive problem, so we have to solve this thing, and that really inspires people to get together, or you have a big opportunity, and that's really, if it's somewhere in the middle, it's not a priority, it's not important, there's no big opportunity, it's harder to get people to collaborate just kind of from a general perspective. So, I mean, I think collaboration, people love to solve problems. They love to get together, and it's finding that moment in time to get people together and creating that inspiration. And we've done that in different ways. So leveraging frameworks that we've talked about so far, but also having tools and techniques, and this is going to sound rather simple, but we've found it rather powerful, is how do you collaborate and inspire people? And we use tools like Yes and. And I'll give you an example of that. A great example is, Elon Musk in saying, let's create a e-commerce platform called PayPal. Yes, and let's sell that company and create SpaceX. Yes, and let's create a electric car company called Tesla. So you can see the power of yes anding, and we create that energy all the time in fusion sessions. Another one is a classic example, and this is in Google Sprint specifically. How might we come up with an electric car? How might we create a power source system in someone's home that not only charges the car, but we have solar panels that will become part of the charging station and power reservoir. So you can see the power of how might we. So it's creating that inspiration, focusing on that massive opportunity or massive problem, and collaborating as a team for outcomes.
Interesting. So one thing that I love about what you said about design thinking is having that empathetic outlook towards the product design. So let's talk about human-centered design, right? So how to get started in that? Like say if typically in a legacy product design phase, you look totally different direction. Okay, what my product can do now, what can I add to that so it can make life easier. But now we're talking about let's go to the customer or the consumer end and try to like how we can do that. Like what are some of the thoughts there to create a human-centered design thinking?
Definitely. Yeah. So, I think you nailed it when you said, human and human-centered. I think so many folks in, product, and I've been there too. I was in product strategy, but you can do market research, you can do, product strategy, but if you're not getting with whom you serve, if you're not getting with that human, you're going to actually, miss something. So it's, part of it is getting, I call it whom you serve together. So it could be in our case, it's getting, nurses together and understanding through questions, where their pains are. But it's follow me home is another powerful technique to, follow your consumer home, understand what their journey is, understand what their life is like, and everything down to become an archaeologist, become a scientist, become a experimenter, and think of yourself that way. And if you're a product person, make sure you go follow your consumer home, but become that deep note taker. Understand exactly what's going on in their lives, what influences they have, what are their biggest pains, what are their challenges, what is their journey. So to your point, understanding from a human perspective, from that one-on-one perspective, what's going on in their life. It could be holding panels as well, and getting folks together, hearing what they're discussing, how they're discussing it, asking specific questions, but be that experimenter, and get out there and see what things are like in your customer's environment.
Interesting. And beautiful, actually. I love it. And so let's talk about individual in the silo. So what are some of the tenets of a successful design thinking executive? Like what are some of the ingredients? So they say, okay, if I need to find one guy or the first guy to run the ship, what are some of the qualities that one should look for?
Yeah, I think having high empathy, caring about whom you serve, looking at the different tools and techniques and capabilities, having cross industry experience, having passion. When we actually hire people for Fusion, we bring them through a pretty arduous interview, but it's things like we give them a market research project to do. We actually hand them ethnographic research that we've done and ask them to synthesize that, and that's a key aspect of design thinking is, are you able to take, kind of disparate information that's not that coherent, and synthesize that to understand that deeply, and to draw kind of hold off your solutioning in a way and really think about what the potential opportunities are. And then what we have folks do is we have them get up and do a journey map with our team present in the room, and we're testing for a bunch of different things. Can they kind of walk us through a journey? How do they interact with our team? Are they a great kind of, can they listen? So these are some of the things that we're testing for. And, do they take a persona in account? Do they focus on the person and who they're solving for? And, those are some of both the soft skills and the hard skills that we look for. But I think, above all, having empathy, being able to listen, being able to really synthesize information that's coming from a multitude of directions. You might have, hard data here. You may have soft kind of, ethnographic research here. How do you pull all of that information together and not only synthesize it, how do you integrate that? And then how do you focus on solutions that will actually come back and solve a pain for a group of folks that you're looking to solve for?
That is beautiful. Well said. So now let's talk about how do you measure success of your initiative? Like, what are some of the KPIs? So if you are sort of designing this, and even for your fusion, if you can share some of the key KPIs that you say, okay, whatever I'm doing is a success. Like, what are some of those indicators that you monitor?
Sure, definitely. If it's, it might be different things. You can start with, Net Promoter Score is a measurable. We actually do usability scores as well. That say, how usable is this? And it could be a physical product, or it could be a digital product. One of the things we measure is speed to market. So outside industry, waterfall development can range anywhere from 12 to 18 months. We look at being within, and traditional agile outside measures are getting a product to market 6 to 8 months. So we definitely take into account, have we accelerated an initiative, to market? And then one of the things we measure, and it's interesting because I ask outside folks this all the time, how many of the initiatives have you been a part of that actually got to market? So what percentage of your engagements are you driving a solution to market? So that's a huge important factor for us. And then classically, some of the traditional product areas that we look at are, what's the level of adoption? What's the level of use? And what impact, have we had? So if it's, nurse practitioners that we created a product for in the field, what are the, impacts in terms of, business drivers? It might be, is it more site visits? Was the, NPS score from, patients higher? Was the NPS score from nurse practitioners higher? And, we will go back and actually do follow me homes again to make sure that we've improved, their overall experience as well. So from a, human-centered design perspective, did we have the impact that we wanted to?
Interesting. That's awesome. So one thing when you were saying that, that was coming to my mind, and it's kind of a pushback from what I'm thinking about design thinking. So if I think Ford once said that if you ask people what they want, they probably want a faster horse, right? So what about some of the disruptive technologies or the disruptive trends that are out there? So I think one thing that, and this is something that even I struggle with most of our clients as well, that hey, if we use too much data, so it tells us the incremental innovations, right? It tells us, okay, customer wants this, customer wants that. But if any disruption comes into the marketplace, it makes us vulnerable to recruit those, because we became very data centered, and we tend to be sort of even take disruption from the very analytical sort of progressive end. So what is your thinking on sort of on that how is a concept which is very analytical, by the way, and which is very beautiful to understand, to have an empathy about a customer, could have a tendency to miss out on any disruption or something. Like, do you think that's true, or what's your take?
Yeah, I think any disruption. I love your analogy about, if I ask my customer that asks for a faster horse,
Right.
I think that's exactly what human-centered design and design thinking solves for, is not having a preconceived notion, nor asking, what do you think of this product? What do you think of this feature? Because you sometimes will get in trouble listening to customers that directly, because you're asking a question that has a preconceived notion to it. Do you like this? Yes or no? And with human-centered design and design thinking, you're actually going to the root cause of what are your daily, what's your daily activity, what's your daily journey, what are your pains. So to your point, if you have a lot of data, there's a level of abstraction to that data. But if you go to kind of the fundamentals of human-centered design, while your data points may be smaller, your ability to synthesize actual human pains is very, very high. And if you take the kind of convergence of those two, so if you have, vast data perhaps on, consumer activities, it might be that you have data coming back from their phone, and you actually know their journey, you can layer that on with human-centered design. And through ethnographic research, you can actually come to a convergence point to say, wow, we have data from 1 million people. This is actually the patterns we're seeing. Here's what we learned from our ethnographic research, and here's the discovery. And I think that's the real power behind human-centered design and design thinking is that discovery, being that, that scientist, being that experimenter, considering all of the factors, and then finding those aha moments of either convergence or divergence, things that don't make sense that you could potentially solve for. That's really the kind of fun and energy that it can bring.
Interesting. So I think so. It makes me. It reminds me of a story that I read a couple of months back about Coca-Cola. So I think at one point Coca-Cola was trying to bring up with a next secret sauce to their next version of Coke, and they were trying to figure out how we can change the sugar level to figure out who likes what, and then they realized that they were looking at this problem the wrong way, because people tend to love, so everyone love a particular set of sugar. So it's just that the product itself will align itself to its own audience, rather than the other way, that hey, let me ask everyone and find a magical sugar portion that is acceptable to our audience. So one thing that and Coke, I know they do a lot of research on sort of figuring out their customer behavior. So what are some of your businesses that you love who are doing great job at design thinking concept, or actually building a product which is actually keeping humans at the center of their design? If you can share some of the stories there.
Yeah, I think some of the companies that come to mind are clearly Amazon, and if you think about some of the initiatives that they've had lately, I think my Alexa is going to turn on now. But that coupled with I was thinking with Amazon that they probably went through something like the 10 types of innovation, because the only thing that they don't own in the home was the fridge, right? Everything that you order from Amazon, it was everything but the what's in your fridge. And then buying Whole Foods actually solves that. Now they have everything in the home, a lot of stuff outside of the home as well. But when you think about the simplicity, the iPhone itself, for me, I used to order Amazon quite often. They've broken that barrier, because I had to log into my phone, I had to put in my password, I had to go on Amazon. That's a lot of steps. So all of a sudden, Alexa comes about, and I'm able to break through those barriers. So simple tasks like that, while to your point about a faster horse, I wouldn't have told Amazon that. But if they do ethnographic research on me and see me go on my phone and wow, there's 5 barriers before he can order, something on his phone. And not only that, he can't order food. Wow, let's buy Whole Foods. Let's come up with Alexa. I mean, that's the, simplicity of it all, right? But if you think about human-centered design, beginning with that, that's the power in it. So, Amazon clearly, knocking it out of the park there.
Interesting. And so one more conversation that I can recall, which is very exciting. So I think about 7 years back, I went to a conference, a telecom conference, and I met BlackBerry executive there, and I was talking to him about how BlackBerry is, how it's sort of going down, and I used to be a hard nut fan of BlackBerry, and I was saying, hey guys, you're not getting it right or something, right? And they say, you know what, till last day, we are our executives got we were hitting all of our targets. Our customers are in check. We have been, and BlackBerry was very methodical in sort of capturing user feedback and putting it into design thinking and and making everything 2 click away. And they were aesthetics, they were just killing it, fair and square. But the entire market landscape shifted, right? So and they missed out on that because they were very on the button and sort of pressing, and they were some of the things they were trying to tap onto. And that made me believe what happens if the market changes, right? So if suppose that's why maybe my customers who are my customers now, there's something else brewing on the side that probably one day will take all of them away at once, but they're happy with me for now. So how would a concept of design thinking, or how could sort of a concept of human-centered design help me secure myself from those instances? Do we have some kind of serendipity? Do we sort of survey non-users as well? What are some of the hacks that we can do to sort of safeguard ourselves from the BlackBerry phenomena?
Definitely, yeah. And this is really part of the experimenter, right? You need to be a market experimenter, and part of it might be, what are the different trends? And it doesn't even have to be in your industry, but it's trend watching to see, what trends are occurring. It's, classic market research. What are our competitors doing? What are some adjacent markets perhaps that have interesting things going on that could converge, with what we're doing? What are the mega trends out there? And one of the frameworks that I leverage highly is called Real Win Worth It. And it's, as you start to find different opportunities within your market space, it says, is it real? And that's really looking at the competition, the opportunity, can we win? And that's really around what is your core competency, and what are some adjacent competencies that you could actually leverage for this opportunity. And then finally, is it worth it? This is the investment part of things where, we need to invest X amount of dollars, but, can we win? Is the opportunity real? And then, is it worth it? But kind of looking at different, industries as an experimenter, and coming up with potential new opportunities. And then, where it starts to mesh, this is all part of human-centered design or design thinking, but then going to talk to people about it in the market space to validate or invalidate or adjust. That's could work for startups or enterprises as well.
Interesting. And thank you so much for shedding light on that. And now we're almost at the tail end of the conversation, and you've been phenomenal. So let's talk about your favorite read that you want to share with our audience. Yeah.
Definitely. So for me, and I've talked about it just a few moments ago, but the 10 types of innovation is just tremendous. And, it really kind of gave me a structured way of thinking about, innovation. 101 Designs is a great read as well. And then, personally, I love Tim Ferriss, and I look for personal kind of frameworks and structures to go by because I'm an experimenter as well. So, Tools of Titan is a personal favorite of mine. And I'm always flipping through it to see what hacks, personally I can, try experiment with next. So.
Thank you so much. And with that, Ed, again, super, like my entire notes, I've never filled in all of my notes. So definitely it's boatload, and love every piece of information that you provide with us. And thank you for being very candid and sharing your thoughts with us. Now, before we part ways, love your closing thoughts for our audience, if you have one.
Yeah, closing thoughts are, never stop learning, be an experimenter, and just, go hard and change the world.
Couldn't have said any better. Thank you so much, Ed, and you're always welcome to come to our show. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a